Hey groups, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving weekend. It's crazy to think we are in December and we're rocking and rolling. Just to give you an update on the calendar, we've got this week for groups content and next week for content as well. And as a group, if you want to do something fun in December, if you want to have a Christmas party of sorts, don't feel like you always have to be deep into content. Enjoy some time together, gain community together. I want to make sure you guys know you have the freedom to do some of those things. But as we jump into content this week, we are now in a new series. We're moving into Advent, and the series we are in right now is King, God, and Sacrifice, and looking at the journey of the wise men and the gifts that they brought to Jesus when he was born. And this past week, we looked at Jesus as King. What does King mean? And we looked through the Old Testament even and saw how the Israelites pleaded for a king. They wanted someone to reign over them. And finally, God said, fine, I'll give you a king. If that's what you want, that is what I'll give you. And what we find throughout the Old Testament is were a few good kings, but most of them were bad. Most of them were wicked. And we look then further into when Jesus was born and how Jesus is the King of Kings and how Jesus fulfilled the prophecies of how there would be a king one day who would be above all, right? So Jesus as this King of Kings. And I loved the words that Eric had to speak about who Jesus is and why he is the King of Kings. So before we jump into the questions of this, if you got kids in the room and if they want to jump into the groups content for them, leaders, there is some kids sections at the bottom of the sheet. Feel free to run through those with them, and then we'll jump right into the adult questions. All right, question number 1. I want you to think back to the challenge from that last week that we put out there. What wisdom have you put in your life? Right? Last week we talked about this idea that we've been in wisdom through this whole year. What have you put in place, or what do you need to put in place as we move forward? And for question number 2, I want you to start out by reading 2 Kings 21, 1 through 16. It is the story of one of the kings. And as you're reading through it, I want you to ask yourself these 2 questions. What wicked things did King Manasseh do? And what did the people do because of Manasseh's wickedness? Question number 3, we don't really have kings in this day, right? But think about what is in your life. What do you allow to rule over you? And the question is this: what kind of kings do you have in your life that have led you astray? And what did the influence of those kings lead you to do? And why do you think that might be? Psalm 72, 12 through 14 says this: for he will deliver the needy who cry out, the afflicted who have no one to help. He will take pity on the weak and the needy and will save the needy from death. He will rescue them from oppression and violence, for precious is their blood in his sight. The question is this: what characteristics of this person that they're describing, what characteristics do you see coming out of these verses? And if you compare this king or this person to King Manasseh, which king would you rather serve? Question number 5. I want you to think a minute if kings were brought back into today's age right here in the United States, what would life be like, right? So imagine with me. What would life be like under an awful king, right? What would your day-to-day life look like? And then talk about what would life look like under the perfect king, right? What would your day-to-day be like? We talked through the message this past weekend that Jesus is the King of Kings, that he is the prophesied king that we've heard so much about. What does that, when you think about the question, what does it change, or how does it change your outlook or perspective on knowing that Jesus is king? And when we think about what good things can provide and the stability that they bring, how does Jesus provide those things in your life? And if we truly believe he is the King of Kings, what would that change? And wrapping it up with number 7, which is a bit of a challenge for this week as well. What kind of kings do you need to get rid of in your life? And how can you use that time, right? Thinking of if we've got kings in our life that we're getting rid of, we're going to have a little bit of extra time. How can we give that time to the real King of Kings? I mean, the challenge in this week is to go do that. Right? Have somebody hold you accountable. If you've said those things out loud, allow somebody to ask you later on this week about how that is going with you. If you got some extra time, want to dive into our Digging Deeper section, we take a look back at a book called 1 Samuel, where the Israelites are pleading for a king. And I think that story is super interesting. So if you got some extra time and want to read through that, the Digging Deeper section is on the back and will be followed by some questions. But I'm so excited for this season. I hope as we wrap up this year that groups have been life-giving to you and you're accompanied with a bunch of great questions. So I hope that you guys have a great Christmas season, and we will see you guys next week.